Our opening night is Friday the 13th. And if you look back at the original world premiere performance of The Barber of Seville in Rome in February 20th, 1816, it was not Friday the 13th, but they had their share of bad luck. It was one of those catastrophic first performances of a favorite opera that we love to read about, with Traviata. In fact, Madame Butterfly was one of those as well. And wouldn't you know, part of the problem was that a cat got loose on the stage and jumped into Dr. Bartolo's arms. History has not recorded if it's a black cat, but I'll have to admit my palms were a little sweaty with Friday the 13th coming up. In that first performance, the artist playing Don Basilio got a nosebleed during his big aria, which convulsed the audience in laughter. He was trying to wipe his nose. And the Count Almaviva singing his lovely serenade at the top of the show. Nobody had tuned his guitar. It sounded awful, and a string broke. So maybe they had enough Friday the 13th disasters to spare us coming up in a few days. But that's all right, because it's a comedy after all, and in comedy, if it gets a laugh, you keep it in the act. The music to The Barber of Seville has one function. Well, it actually has two functions, but the main function, Dwight, in a comedy, what should be the function of every aspect of the show? To make us laugh. To make us laugh, absolutely. We want to think a little bit this afternoon about why we laugh when we laugh. There are different schools of comedy, different styles of comedy. For instance, here's what I'm thinking. Back in November, we did another Italian opera buffa, a comic opera by Donizetti, The Elixir of Love. Some people might be thinking, well, you've seen one opera buffa, you've kind of seen them all. They're all based on commedia dell'arte characters and so forth. Really not so much. These two shows could not be more of a contrast. I wasn't able to be with you for a radio preview, but those listeners who may have heard some of my talks around the area for Elixir of Love may remember that I compared it to a genre of film, the romantic comedy. Basically, Elixir of Love was a date movie done on stage. And in fact, I compared it in particular to the Julia Roberts Hugh Grant vehicle Notting Hill from about a decade ago. The story of the mismatched couple, the unsuitable boy pursuing the highly desirable girl, and even though they don't belong together, somehow we're rooting for them. We empathize with them. We want those crazy kids to end up together. And in a romantic comedy, empathy is the key. Nemorino, our sad sack hero in Elixir, was such a nerdy little goofball peasant farmer. I think maybe some of the men in the audience remember when they felt like that, when there was a girl in high school or college that was way out of our league, and we thought we would never be able to make any headway with getting on her good side. And the characters in a romantic comedy, well, it may not be Shakespeare, but they sort of have enough of a three-dimensional character that they behave as more or less as real people do, and we laugh with them. We're empathizing. We identify with, we see ourselves in those characters. Barber of Seville, different kettle of fish. In Barber of Seville, the characters are two-dimensional on purpose. They are cartoons, because this is not romantic comedy, it's farce. And in farce, you take basic human behaviors and you exaggerate them to the point of absurdity. Dwight, do you remember, I want to play a little bit of the overture. Yep. Our last opera, Tosca, had no overture whatsoever. There's a famous overture to Barber of Seville. Do you remember a film from the late 60s or 70s with Walter Matthau called The Fortune Cookie?
Yeah, I remember that, yes.
Yep. Walter Matthau was a shyster, personal injury attorney. Jack Lemmon was his mildly injured client, and together they were trying to bilk the insurance folks out of cajillions of dollars. Walter Matthau obsessively whistled a tune throughout that film as he was improvising his convoluted schemes. It occurs in this overture. Let's hear just a little bit of that main theme from the overture of The Barber of Seville. Now, anybody who saw the fortune cookie is nodding their head. Oh, yeah, I remember him whistling that. And it was a very apt choice of a tune for Mathau's character to whistle because that tune immediately puts us in the world of convoluted plots, harebrained schemes, whispered conspiracies, just as we find in The Barber of Seville, based on that fabulous play by Pierre-Augustin Caron de Beaumarchais. Now, I mentioned this is farce, so instead of thinking of Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant, I'm actually thinking of sets of brothers. When I think of The Barber of Seville, I think of brothers, namely the Marx brothers, the Warner brothers,
Right.
and the Blues brothers, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. And I've got examples of all three of these brothers.
All right.
We're going to start with a little bit of Marx brothers. Now, this is one of my, actually, the very first scene is almost my favorite scene. There is going to be a serenade. Count Almaviva, the most eligible bachelor in Seville, young, handsome, got a lot of political clout, and he's fallen in love with this young girl, Rosina. She's a young orphan girl who's being raised by a prominent Seville citizen, the old Dr. Bartolo, and she's got for the lucky guy who can land her as his wife, she's got a big fat dowry. She's going to come into quite a bit of money. And the Count Almaviva has fallen in love with her, and he wants to serenade her, a big romantic grandstand play. And so he's hired a band. He's got all the money in the world, and he's hired a little orchestra to come out with him underneath her balcony window, and he's going to sing a love song. And I love this because, thinking of Warner Brothers, when Elmer Fudd is going after Bugs Bunny, and he's got his shotgun out, and he's exaggeratedly tiptoeing, and he turns to the camera and says, "Shh, be very, very quiet." This is the first choral number that we get. There is an extensive choral number led by Fiorello, the chief musician, in which they're singing piano, pianissimo, tutto silenzio, quiet, don't make any sound. You have to be, see, it's not dawn yet. They don't want to wake up the neighbors. They don't want the neighbors to call the cops. Everybody's still sleeping. We're in a nice residential area of Seville. And so we have this exaggerated number that goes, you'll hear the tiptoes and the pizzicato strings. Let's hear the musicians coming on with this be very quiet music.
Tutto è silenzio, nessun qui sta, che i nostri canti possa turbar. Tutto è silenzio, nessun qui sta, che i nostri canti possa turbar. Tutto è silenzio, nessun qui sta, che i nostri canti possa turbar.
So they're good enough. The musicians have tiptoed on stage and elaborately shushed each other. Now, that's setting us up for the humor of something going wrong. Obviously, something's going to go wrong with the neighbors are going to be disturbed. You got to think, how would you set this up? What would be the humor? Maybe the Count will start singing and he'll get a little too amorous and sing a really loud high note, and maybe the front doors of the house will burst open and old Dr. Bartolo will have his shotgun and say, "What's the meaning of this?" Or maybe the musicians, maybe there are a bunch of trash cans lined up at the side of the street, and they lose their balance as they're tiptoeing, and as the music begins, they fall over and crash bang, and the loud sounds of, garbage cans crashing into one another. That would get a laugh. Failure is always funny, isn't it? We laugh at, well, it's not funny when I fail. It's funny when you fail, Dwight, I find.
Yes.
I think we can all agree on that.
Yes.
But, they didn't go there. Actually, the serenade goes off without a hitch. It's a lovely romantic serenade. Nothing goes wrong. Well, gee, I guess, I guess he's just going to dismiss them, and then the girl will come out and, we'll have the humor later. But that's not what happens. Actually, after this, they do a perfect job of keeping the peace. And then the Count says, "Now let me pay you." And the moment they see a little sack of coins, they go nunu bonkers. They're so gratified and they want to express their love for the Count and their gratitude that they go berserk. And as you listen to them go berserk in this, we're skipping the serenade for now. This is bookending. We hear the little chorus of musicians going nuts, chasing the Count around, wanting to kiss his hand in gratitude. Just picture Groucho, Chico, and Harpo. And you know the wonderful thing about that moment? It serves no plot point whatsoever. It doesn't. It's just It's just making them go ahead and disturb the neighbors, and the shutter doors fly open, and they're calling the cops and dumping water on them for no reason whatsoever. Absolutely pointless, which I love about it. It's a moment of zany Marx Brothers humor. Now, as for that serenade, yeah, we need to listen to a little bit of this. You know, a couple of interesting things about the serenade of the Count, this Ecco Ridente, a lovely aria. And, you know, we've just had a very passionate love story in Puccini's Tosca just several days ago. And every time that tenor, Mario Cavaradossi, opened his mouth to sing about his girlfriend, oh my goodness, the blood pounding in our temples, passion dripping, making puddles on the floor, very, very erotic, passionate love music. And, you know, the Count is saying all the words. He's saying, your face, you must ease the pain that I feel. He's speaking very amorously. And yet I noticed that when he sings the opening section of this lovely aria, it's romantic, but it is not erotic. There is a complete absence of erotic passion. Partly, I think this is owing to the fact that we're closer to the age of Beethoven and Mozart than we are to the late Romantic period of Puccini. There was a need for decorum. It was considered kind of tacky and vulgar to use bedroom language out in public. You know, we wanted to keep things in balance and restrain our emotions. And then also, it's a comedy. We can't take ourselves quite that seriously. So notice how the beginning of this aria sounds a little like a folk song of all things. So it serves the purpose of being a nice serenade. That's about as romantic as he gets. It's romantic, but not erotic and not particularly passionate. Now, I mentioned that in a comedy, the point of the music is to make us laugh. But there's another big function of music in this bel canto period, the period in which, you know, the Rossini's comment about bel canto music, that style of opera in the early Romantic period in Italy. It's like the old real estate joke. You know that joke? What are the three most important things in real estate?
Location, location, location.
But Rossini made up that joke first. They asked him, what did it take? What were the three qualities necessary to be a successful opera singer? And he said, voice, voice, and voice. Voce, voce, voce. The bel canto period is a period in which we really want to, everything is contained in the voice. All the acting, all the drama, all the expression is in the voice. And we have this device called the coloratura. in which the object is to wow the audience with jaw-dropping display of pyrotechnical vocal virtuosity. It's a style of writing for the voice in which you make the same demands on a singer that you would on the clarinet, the violin, the flute, any orchestral instrument in terms of rapid scales, trills, leaping with rapid speed from low to high register. And again, when the Count goes into the conclusion of his aria, and this is the great Luigi Alva, marvelous technician, the accuracy and the virtuosity is stunning, and yet, is it really passionate? I don't think quite so much, but we still enjoy it. Enough said. Any questions about coloratura? I don't think so. Now, we need to meet our title character, Figaro, who is the Barber of Seville. I think you're the proper generation, Dwight, that you might remember a Steve Martin sketch from the vintage years of Saturday Night Live called Theodoric of York, Medieval Barber.
I do recall that.
This aria, the famous Largo al Factotum, Figaro's monologue in which he introduces himself to us, the audience, speaking directly to us. It's not one of those monologues like Scarpia had where he's talking to the gods. He's talking to you and me, and he's telling us how he enjoys life and describing a day in the life of a barber, and it's a little bit like Theodoric of York. In fact, you really, Dwight, of all of the Leech arias in the baritone repertoire, this may be the best one. He actually speaks in the middle of it of one of his jobs is to attach a leech on your skin. If you're feeling a little, if you're feeling a little ailing, he'll suck the bad blood out of you. See, barbers did a little of everything. They didn't just snip your hair and trim your beard. They would be delivery boys. They would be pizza delivery, flower delivery, messengers, mailmen, dentists. They'd pull your tooth. They'd be a nurse practitioner, short order cook. They might get out their skillet and cook you an omelet. Anything if the price was right. And the other thing to know about this aria, ask any baritone what the most fearsomely, frighteningly difficult aria in the world is. It's this one. Without any warm-up at all, not even any recitative, no dialogue. Figaro has to come out and pop off a bunch of notes at the top of his staff with a killer tessitura and hop around and be comic while he's doing it. You can't stand there like a potted palm and with one hand on your chest and sing. You have to be funny. Here is Figaro.
per un barbiere di qualità, di qualità. Ah, bravo Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, bravo! La 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 la! Fortunatissimo per verità, bravo! La 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 la! Fortunatissimo per verità, fortunatissimo per verità, la 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 la. Pronto a far tutto l'anno di un giorno, sempre intorno in giro sta, 1000 cucaglie per un barbiere, vita più nobile non si dà. Tra la 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 la. Rasori e pettini, lanceti forbici a mio comando, tutto qui sta. Rasori e pettini, lanceti forbici a mio comando, tutto qui sta. Ve la risorsa, poi del mestiere, con la donnetta, col cavaliere, con la donnetta, tra la l'allera, col cavaliere, tra la 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 la. Che bel vivere, che bel piacere, che bel piacere.
Oh, yes, the great Leech aria from the Barber of Seville. I can never, once I saw that translation, it just sort of changed my whole vision of this character. Now, the Count has been listening. His serenade didn't go so well. The girl did not fall into his arms. So at this point, he's going to hire Figaro. You know, sometimes we say, us streetwise New Millennium folks, we say, I know a guy. Figaro was the guy in Seville that you knew if you knew a guy. And the Count knows this guy, and he wants him to be his point man, to dream up some schemes to get him past the door. See, the problem is that Dr. Bartolo wants to come into this fortune that the girl is going to bestow upon whoever she marries. And so even though he's been raising her as his ward, he would still like to marry her. So she's a virtual prisoner in the house. He's taken away her cell phone. She can't Twitter anybody. No internet for her. She's kind of a house prisoner, and he's waiting till she comes of age. He's going to marry her and be rich for the rest of his life. The problem is he's about 4 times her age. He's got a big fat gut. His breath smells like anchovies and garlic, and there's a big ew factor in there for poor Rosina. So at this point, the Barber of Seville, the rest of this show becomes a Roadrunner cartoon. Every Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote cartoon had the very same plot over and over and over. The Roadrunner wants to catch the Wile E. Coyote rather wants to catch the Roadrunner, but there's an obstacle. The Roadrunner's too fast. So Wile E. Coyote writes off to his favorite mail order catalog, the Acme Company, and he'll get one harebrained scheme after another based on something that he orders. Like he'll get a pair of rocket shoes, and now he can run real fast, but he can't control them, and he runs right off a cliff and disappears in a puff of smoke, and that one didn't work so well, but he's indefatigable, that Coyote. He tries again, this time with a rocket belt. And now he can fly, but he flies straight into a cliff and explodes, and it's a harebrained scheme after another. There's now a duet in which Figaro and the Count are hatching their first plan. And the plan will be that the Count will pretend to be a soldier new in town, and he's going to have an order from the colonel or the corporal or whoever the head of the regiment is, ordering Dr. Bartolo to give him room and board in his house, so he'll get into the household and be able to seduce that girl. Now, the problem is that this is a wonderful duet, but it's a little bittersweet. I think most of our listeners know that the sequel to The Barber of Seville was the second Beaumarchais play, The Marriage of Figaro, which was turned into one of the greatest of all operas by Mozart. We all know that in The Marriage of Figaro, Figaro's relationship with the Count has changed. He's now a member of the court at the Count's palace. He's been promoted, and he's serving the Count. and the Count has betrayed him in the sequel in Mozart's opera. The Count wants to basically seduce Figaro's own bride-to-be, the little chambermaid Susanna. And the Figaro feels betrayed, he is hurt, he is angry, he vows to bring the Count down. And we're accustomed, when we listen to comic operas, we all know that the wily servants always get the upper hand over the clueless nobles. It's a cliche of this type of drawing room comedy. But I think you can't appreciate that unless you first hear this duet from the Barber of Seville, in which the Count and the Figaro, well, they're not pals, they're of different social stature, but they are on the same page. They see eye to eye. Figaro is going to help him chase that skirt. And you'll hear the Count take up the same melody that Figaro sings, dum-da-dum, da-dum, 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 da-da-da, because they're in total agreement. It's a much more innocent, sunny, uncomplicated relationship. Here's a little of the Rossini.
Portentoso, omnipossente, un vulcano la mia mente, già comincia a diventarsi, all'idea di quel metallo, un vulcano la mia mente incomincia a diventarsi, sì, all'idea di quel metallo, un vulcano la mia mente incomincia a diventar, un vulcano incomincia a diventar. Su vediamo di quel metallo qualche effetto sorprendente del vulcano della tua mente, qualche mostro singolar, sì, del vulcano della tua mente, qualche mostro singolar, sì, del vulcano della tua mente, qualche mostro singolar, sì, singolar, sì, singolar, qualche mostro singolar.
Now that's about as sunny and good-humored and good-natured as a couple of guys singing together in Italian can get. They are really seeing eye to eye. Now, Figaro sings a very famous song, Se vuol ballare, when he discovers that the Count in Marriage of Figaro is trying to bed his fiancée. And he sings, if you want to dance, Mr. Count, I'm going to play the tune. And the fact that their relationship has been turned upside down like this, we just have lost sight of how shocking this would be to an audience in those times as the French Revolution was fomenting and taking shape. This aria, let's hear a little bit of the Mozart aria. This is how the lower classes felt in Western Europe at this time in the 1780s.
Se vuol ballare, signor Contino, se vuol ballare, signor Contino, il chitarrino le suonerò, il chitarrino le suonerò, sì, le suonerò, sì, le suonerò.
A lot of people feel that one composition, Figaro turning against his buddy and his pal and vowing to bring him down, it's as emblematic as any single piece of music could be of the passions that led to the bloodshed of the French Revolution. That aria may have been the straw that stirred the drink, and it was a political hot potato at the time. And I don't think we can appreciate that without putting it in the context of that jolly duet, the much more innocent duet showing how their relationship used to be in the opera that we're going to be seeing in just a few days, The Barber of Seville at Virginia Opera. Well, Dr. Bartolo knows he's got a problem. This fella, whoever he is, nobody knows it's the great Count Almaviva. They think it's some young student, has been hanging around like a dog, hanging around trying to look for scraps. He's been singing serenades. He's making eyes. There's some chemistry there. Dr. Bartolo knows that he's got a rival. And he talks to his good friend, Don Basilio, the music master, about how to solve this problem. Now, Don Basilio is about Rosina's only contact with the outside world. He comes to give her her private voice lesson every week. And we love this character because he's such a piece of work. He is oily, he is smarmy, and his stock in trade is malicious yet subtle gossip. Now, I'm going to give the listeners a little information, a cheater's guide to the music of Rossini. If you hear opera music on WHRO and you want to know if it's Verdi or Puccini or Rossini or who it might be, there's a little bit of musical DNA. Our friend Gioacchino Rossini had a trick. He had a bag o' tricks, and there's a trick that he pulled out in nearly every composition that he wrote. It's the great crescendo. I could play almost any piece from Barber of Seville, and eventually you'd hear a crescendo, where the music, a simple idea, is repeated over and over and over, and gets louder and louder and louder until it reaches a great climax. Now, the reason I'm going to play you Don Basilio's aria is that the music, the crescendo, illustrates the words. He's saying, leave it to me. We're just going to drop a little bit of gossip, and you know how it is with gossip. Pretty soon, the next person who repeats it makes it a little bigger. The next person makes it a little bigger. Pretty soon, they're riding him out of town on a rail with tar and feathers. And the music is, it's just wonderful to hear this simple idea gain in intensity, illustrating just how gossip works in your own neighborhood here in Tidewater, Virginia.
Terra, sottovoce, sibilando, va scorrendo, va ronzando, nelle orecchie della gente, s'introduce destramente, e le teste di cervelli, fa stordire, fa golfiar. Dalla bocca fuoriuscendo, lo schiamazzo va crescendo, prende forza poco a poco, volo già dillo quello, che bel volo la tempesta che descende la foresta, va fischiando brontolando e ti fa l'orror chiamare, alla finta va che scoppia, si propaga, si raddoppia e produce un'esplosione come un colpo di cannone, un tremoto temporale, un tumulto generale che fa l'aria ribombare, un tremoto temporale, un tumulto generale che fa l'aria ribombare. Che meschino calunniato, avvilito, calpestato, sotto il pubblico fratello per gazzarte a crepar. E il meschino calunniato, avvilito, calpestato, sotto il pubblico flagello vergon forte va crepar.
Listeners, if you come to the Barber of Seville, here's a little game you might play to keep your mind from wandering. From one musical number to another, just make a little note. Does this one have a big crescendo in it? I think you'll be amazed at how many times. This is why Beethoven once told Rossini, and Beethoven loved the Barber of Seville, but he took Rossini aside and said, you know, you are a lazy ass. Now, we haven't heard much from Dr. Bartolo. Dr. Bartolo catches Rosina trying to pass a love letter down to this student who's been serenading her, and he kind of snaps. He loses it. Dr. Bartolo is that comic character who has found life through the current times. Fred Mertz is a Dr. Bartolo character, the pompous old goat who is delusional and doesn't realize that he's no longer attractive to the fair sex. There's another Dr. Bartolo figure, Elmer Fudd. He's that old Pantalone character from the Barber of Seville, from the Commedia dell'arte. We're going to listen to Dr. Bartolo laying down the law to Rossini, saying, young woman, when you live under my house, you obey my rules. You go straight to your room. No more letters for you. You stay off the telephone. You're grounded, young lady. No more dessert for a month. And he breaks into a marvelous example of the patter that is so characteristic of the basso buffo in Italian comic opera, and we also find it in Gilbert and Sullivan and Stephen Sondheim for that matter, but nobody does it like Rossini. And listeners, as you hear this wonderful Enzo Dada rattle off this amazing patter, I want you to picture Elmer Fudd turning red in the face with steam coming out of his ears.
Signorina un'altra volta quando partono da fuori, signorina un'altra volta quando partono da fuori, le concini si vittoria, il suo modo cosa saprà. Signorina un'altra volta quando partono da fuori, signorina un'altra volta quando partono da fuori, le concini si vittoria, il suo modo cosa saprà. E non c'è nulla le smorte, faccia pure che sta morta, faccia pure che sta morta. Cospetto per quella porta, ne mellare, che potrà. Però sì, l'innocentina, è sconsolata, disperata. E non c'è nulla di sbagliare. Faccia quello che sta morta. Cosa dopo quella porta? Deve la rete rotta. E non c'è innocentino, sconsolata e disperata, in su camera serrata, finché volete dovrà. Il dottore era serrata, finché volete star dovrà. In su camera serrata, finché volete dovrà. Signorina un'altra volta quando partono da fuori, signorina un'altra volta quando partono da fuori, la concini si vittoria.
He said yes. C.
Yes.
Yeah.
C.
Yeah. 16. There were two groups of 16 C's. He really means it. And, that's wonderful because that word is not in the libretto. He's telling her, yes, you will obey me. Yes. You won't find that in the libretto. That's Rossini adding that. That's just wonderful. Now, it's time for harebrained scheme number 1 to launch into action. And Rossini, is the music beautiful in The Barber of Seville? What we just heard in Dr. Bartolo's patter, would most of our listeners say, oh, that's beautiful, beautiful music? I think beautiful, we have to expand our definition of beautiful. If the music has the effect on us that the composer intended, I say that that's a form of beauty. Mm-hmm. And if it's to make us smile, that's fine. It doesn't always have to be about sensuous melody and lush harmony and so forth. That made me smile. I think that patter was beautiful. And now we have music in which the orchestra characterizes a drunk. And here I, again, just want to briefly recall in contrast with The Elixir of Love. When poor Nemorino, in the opera we did in November, Donizetti's Elixir of Love, when he drank his love potion, we cringed because we knew it was cheap red wine, and Nemorino thought it was a love potion, and he was getting tipsy, and he really was tipsy, and we didn't want him to be. We were afraid he was going to ruin it, and we identified with him, and when we laughed with him. now the Count is pretending to be drunk. So again, the characteristic of drunkenness that you're going to hear, you'll hear the lurching rhythm in the orchestra, unsteady on the feet, and then a big rhythmic lurch when you lose your balance. The orchestra is telling us what it feels like to be drunk, but it's exaggerated to the point that we're laughing at these folks. Not so much with them. We're laughing at Dr. Bartolo because he believes it. Here's the Count barging his way into the household with brandy on his breath. Again, it's a different kind of musical beauty. It's cartoonish, but it has exactly the effect on us that we want. Now, Dwight, what I love about Rossini, what I love about a lot of comic operas, is when they take the devices of serious opera and poke fun at them and mock them. You know, think back to another opera we did earlier to start our all-Italian season, Il Trovatore. The finale to Act 2 of Trovatore has a moment when there is the big plot twist. And all the characters on stage are stopped in their tracks because they are bewildered, I tell you, and shocked by what has taken place. In Trovatore, it was when the baritone was about to abduct the soprano, and the tenor, who everybody thought was dead, suddenly charged on stage with his merry band of men to rescue her. And they all stop in their tracks. They turn out to the audience looking like sausages on a plate, and they sing an extended ensemble in which they say, "Oh, I can't believe what has transpired. My brow is furrowed. I cannot catch my breath." And it goes on for some time. Well, Rossini, we're going to hear this plan start to fall apart. Harebrained scheme number one for Wile E. Coyote is about to fall like a lead balloon because the exchange with Dr. Bartolo gets a little heated. He doesn't like having this drunk in his house, and the cops come. And they want to arrest everybody and haul them down to jail. And you'll hear a lot of patter. You'll hear an ensemble of patter from Rosina, Figaro, the Barber, Dr. Bartolo, and the Count, all giving their hurried alibis to the cops. "Oh, it wasn't me, it was him. I'm an innocent bystander." And suddenly, the Count, before he gets arrested, he takes the sergeant over to one side and shows him his Count ID. He carries a Count card with him. He belongs to the Count Union. And immediately, the Count genuflects and lets him go. And this is totally unexpected. Why are they kowtowing to this drunken soldier? And it's wonderful because the way it's always staged, everybody freezes and nobody moves. As for a ridiculously long time, one by one, they all say, "Oh, I'm shocked. I'm frozen with confusion." And there's a lovely little detail right at the end that I'll point out to you when we've heard this.
Via di qua
did you hear that? Did you hear that little chord in the high woodwinds after Rosina sang about how she was frozen in place and didn't know what to think? You know what I think that little chord was? They're all literally not moving. Everybody's frozen in the position that they had assumed when the cops came in. And I think that's Rosina blinking in bewilderment. That little chord in the flutes, I just love that. You have to get the visual. They are literally all frozen. And one by one, they all repeat that little cadence that Rosina just sang. And it goes on for such an absurd length of time that it's a delicious mocking of what Verdi did for real in most of his operas. The big ensemble with the plot twist. Well, that was our first harebrained scheme from the Acme mail order company. It didn't go so well. The cops came. That's not a good thing. In Act 2, we have our second harebrained scheme. Figaro's the first to admit, yeah, that wasn't so good. I got a better one. They know that Figaro and the Count know that Rosina takes this voice lesson once a week with Don Basilio, the music master. And Figaro says, yeah, that's the ticket. Why don't you, we'll say that Don Basilio is sick. You show up and you're the substitute music master. You're going to give her voice lesson. That's the ticket. You'll get right in there and you guys can exchange email addresses once you're, he won't be paying attention. Perfect. Now, again, I'm thinking of Warner Brothers, Dwight. You know how in lots of Bugs Bunny cartoons, Bug would put on some lipstick and a wig with his rabbit ears sticking out of it and a dress and bat his eyelashes and totally bamboozle Elmer Fudd, who thought it was some movie star. The Count now dresses up in the long, flowing, somewhat clerical-looking robes of Don Basilio and a big, floppy, clerical-looking hat. These music masters were very often had taken minor orders in the church and would take care of the music for the services. And Don Basilio is quite sanctimonious. And so our Count, now pretending to be the substitute music master, he's going to be even more sanctimonious. This is my favorite moment in the opera. Now, Dwight, I want you to play just the first few bars of the theme that the orchestra plays as the Count makes his way into Dr. Bartolo's house in his new disguise. Now, think of that theme. I'm going to guess that a lot of WHRO listeners who actually like classical music, who love a Chopin concerto or a Bartok orchestral piece, if they're cruising around doing chores in their car and twisting the dial and they hear that little theme, yum, dum, 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 da, 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 they're going to think, that is not the kind of music I enjoy. That sounds a little corny. It sounds a little quaint. My grandmother might like that. I think I'll see if I can find Rush Limbaugh. We'll just move on. You have to understand that the merit of opera music has sometimes nothing to do with its intrinsic musical merit. It's not the function of all opera music to be your favorite kind of music. It's not always supposed to be thrilling or effective. This music in context is hysterical because the music is being obnoxious, because the Count wants to be obnoxious. He keeps saying joy and peace, pace et gioia, making the sign of the cross, joy and peace. Dr. Bartolo's trying to find out what he wants. What are you doing here? What can I do for you? Joy and peace, peace and joy, making him more and more aggravated. At one point, we'll hear Dr. Bartolo say, "Ho capito," which means, I get it, joy and peace. What do you want? Boy, he's annoying.
Mille grazie, non si incomodi. Gioia e pace per 1000 anni. Obbligato, in verità. Pace e gioia sia con voi. Mille grazie, non si incomodi. Gioia e pace per 1000 anni. Obbligato, in verità, questa volta non mi ignoto. Ma son colpa andato godo. Non ravviso, non ricordo. Anche per questo balordo. Ma quel volto. Un nuovo travestimento. Non capisco chi sarà. Più propizio a me sarà. Sì, propizio a me sarà. Gioia e pace, pace e gioia. Ho capito. Oh, ciel, che noia. Gioia e pace, ben di cuore. Basta, 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 per pietà. Gioia, pace, pace. Ho capito, ho capito. Oh, ciel, che noia. Ben di cuore. Pace e gioia. Basta, 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 per pietà. Ma che perfido destino. Il vecchio non mi conosce. Ma che barbara giornata. Ma mia sorte fortunata. Ma che perfido destino. Ma che barbara giornata. Ma che perfido destino. Ma che barbara giornata.
Bugs Bunny just pushing Elmer's buttons until he's about to strangle him. And I love the little asides when they come over and talk to us in between. Dr. Bartolo saying, something fishy is going on here. I think I've seen this guy before. I don't know what's going on. And then the Count, for his part, comes over to stage right and talks to us in the front row on that side, just saying this is the funniest thing ever. He's going to pop a blood vessel. He's going to have an aneurysm. And then right back to it. Peace and joy. And, you know, I always picture the Count with one of those Jimmy Carter smiles. You know, when Jimmy gets that beatific smile that he gets sometimes. Yeah. Now, all is going swimmingly. Rosina does come down, and she does have her voice lesson, and they do exchange email addresses while Dr. Bartolo falls asleep. And of course, sopranos in the olden days, when they played Rosina, they used to sing any old thing that they wanted during this scene. They would sing Stephen Foster songs, arias from other operas, even though Rossini gave them a perfectly good one. Now, again, the plan has to go comically wrong. And it does, because who's the last person that they want to see showing up right now? He's there in place of Don Basilio, who they've said is desperately ill, home in bed. There's a knock on the door, and it's Don Basilio. Now, I have mentioned the Blues Brothers. We've referenced the Marx Brothers, heard them in the scene one. We've referenced Warner Brothers, which is pretty much all the way through this opera. You know, there's a reason that there are several Bugs Bunny cartoons using the music of Rossini. Yes. It's because the animators recognized this is our humor. It's the very same characters and the very same jokes that we do all the time. Now we get to the Blues Brothers. There was a classic sketch from Saturday Night Live back in the 70s with Belushi and Aykroyd. It was called The Guest That Wouldn't Leave. It was a parody of a horror film trailer, and Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin had given a lovely party in their lovely home, and now the party was over. All the guests had left except for John Belushi, and they're dropping hint after hint. Gosh, you know, all the other guests have left, haven't they? Yeah, you got any more pretzels? John Belushi just won't take the hint. Aykroyd says, I've got a big meeting first thing tomorrow at work. And Belushi says, really? I've got the day off. You know? And finally, they go off, the married couple, and they come back, and they're in their pajamas. Jane Curtin's got curlers in her hair. They're brushing their teeth with toothpaste dripping down their chins. And they say, we're going to bed. And without missing a beat, John Belushi says, you got any more cheese dip? And at this point, the horror film music comes up, bum, 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 and the big headline across the screen, The Guest That Wouldn't Leave. Well, this sketch takes place at this point in Act 2. Don Basilio is going to ruin everything because Dr. Bartolo is going to figure out that there's an imposter here. So Dr. Bartolo says, gosh, I thought you were sick in bed. Really? I feel fine. Never felt better. So now they've got to finesse him out the door. And Figaro's there, and Rosina, and the Count, and they're saying, oh no, you look really, really sick. Oh my gosh, you're burning up. You have no color whatsoever. And they're hinting that he needs to play along. Don Basilio is a little slow on the uptake, but eventually he gets the hint. Why, yes, I do feel a little pale. I am getting feverish. And they're trying to get him out the door, and he won't leave. You know, Dwight, certain people enjoy ill health, and they enjoy being the center of attention. Now we come to my second favorite moment in this opera. the quintet, Buonasera, mio signore. You're going to hear them sing presto a letto, quickly to bed, to bed. And he stands there like a tree rooted to the spot. He won't leave. And they begin singing Buonasera, mio signore, a happy sing-song little ditty. Good night, bye-bye. They're like the stewardesses when you're getting off the airplane. Bye-bye now. And of course the stewardess is thinking, leave. And one by one, they take their opportunity to try to finesse him out the door, but Don Basilio always manages to get right back to the center of the room. Finally, they get him out the door, and you're going to hear at the end of this excerpt a marvelous moment when there's a beat of about a couple of bars of silence, and they think that they've done it, and they're wiping their brows in relief, and suddenly, there he is again, singing at the top of his lungs. He is the guest that wouldn't leave.
Presto a letto, 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 presto a letto. Oh, brutta assai. Dunque vado. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, buonasera. Buonasera, mio signore. Presto andate via di qua. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, buonasera. Buonasera, mio signore. Presto andate via di qua. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, buonasera. Buonasera, mio signore. Presto andate via di qua. Buonasera, Bendicore. Buonasera, buonasera. Buonasera, Bendicore. Poi di Mozzi parlerà. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, sanità. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore. Maledetto seccatore, seccatore. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, mio signore. Piace tante sanità. Presto date via di qua. Presto date via di qua. Presto date via di qua.
The guest that wouldn't leave, but finally they do get him out the door. And of course, all ends well. Now, it's a happy ending. In conclusion, wrapping up our preview of Barber of Seville today, Dwight, I just want to make one final thought comparing this opera to the opera that Mozart wrote as the sequel. Of course, the sequel came much earlier than Rossini's opera, but in terms of the characters and their journey, Mozart's opera is the sequel. Barber of Seville is one of the most clever and humorous operatic comedies in the repertoire. Mozart's Marriage of Figaro is one of the sublime achievements of Western man, right up there with the invention of the polio vaccine and the invention of the airplane or in Shakespeare's plays. And of course, the characters are darker and more complex in the Marriage of Figaro because things have happened. It turns out that the Count, far from being the uncomplicated, gallant hero that he is in The Barber of Seville, he turns out to be a little bit of a jackass, a very flawed hero in The Marriage of Figaro. He's betrayed his wife. He is cheating behind her back. He's very possessive of her. Figaro, as we have already noted, has changed his view of the Count and has a much more animosity in the relationship and much more tension. All of the characters have gotten to a different stage of life in which there is heartbreak, there's adversity, there's betrayal, there's the need for forgiveness and reconciliation. And that's what gives Mozart's comedy, even though it has riotously funny episodes, it gives it a much deeper place in our hearts because it is so much more ambitious. However, I think this may hold the key for why we have such affection for the Barber of Seville. I don't know about you, but I'm 57 years of age. I look back on the days when I was young, footloose, fancy-free, when I thought I had problems in my 20s, and I realize now how untroubled life really was. We look back on our youth when we get to a certain stage of life, and we long for the uncomplicated problems, for the problems that really were fairly trivial. We had not been tested by life. We wish we could go back. We wish we could be students again and learn and not have mortgages and not have dysfunctional family relationships and marriages with problems and financial problems. That's what the Barber of Seville is. These characters who go through so much in The Marriage of Figaro, and even more so in the third Beaumarchais play. Everything is sunny, happy, uncomplicated. The problems are easily resolved. There's no need for forgiveness because life is uncomplicated and it's all about humor. It's where we all wish we could go.
Indeed.
It's those characters, they're at that stage of life that we all wish we could return to. And you know what? Starting Friday, March 13th at the Harrison Opera House, you can go back there. For about 3 hours, you can live in that uncomplicated world of youth when we're young and healthy, and our biggest problem is how we're going to get the girl of our dreams.